Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara again, aka Preacher with Parrots. Today is still the 12/18/2016. We're going in to spend a half hour, more or less, um, in our study of the New Testament in the Gospels. We've been studying about um, Jesus has been healing the multitudes, and we're in Luke 6, but we're going now to Matthew chapter 12, verse 15. And what Matthew 12 tells us, Mark 3 tells us the same thing. When Jesus knew it, he withdrew himself from thence, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. I've been in revival meetings where they pray for the sick, and I've heard it mentioned he healed them all, and people ask questions. Technically, we're in the same period of time as Jesus was here. Let me make a slight change in that, what I just said. Here in Matthew 12 and Mark 3, we are still under law. Not that it has anything to do with healing, but we're still under law. At the time Christ died on the cross, we went from being under law to being under grace. People ask if this is what they did and there were no changes. God didn't advise us that he was making any changes in healing the sick, or as we've been reading in the harmony of the Gospels, that is from the four Gospels, usually Matthew, Mark, and Luke, occasionally from John. We have no expression of any difference in the matter of healing. In the matter of bringing sacrifices and things like that and laws, yes, we do. So people have asked, and this is a delicate subject, and it's difficult to answer because, I try to answer something correctly, and sometimes it's impossible to give a knowledgeable, correct answer to a question like this. But this clearly says, multitudes followed Jesus, and he healed them all. Did he have a reason for healing them all in those days and not in our days? I've heard people, they don't come right out and say it, but they sort of try to say, if you pray for somebody's healing and they're not healing, somebody's faith is lacking. Okay, whose faith is lacking? The person who prays? The person who is sick? The congregation that's present when the prayer goes forth? I've known, and you got to remember that I'm old, so some of you may not have ever heard of things like this, but I remember when there were evangelists that did not want to pray for the sick if there were any unbelievers around. They didn't want any lack of faith in the tent or in the room. And I can recall that if there were difficult situations, somebody released from the hospital just long enough to come to be prayed for and then going back to the hospital, something like that, they would dismiss the service and have most of the people leave. And then only people of faith remain. I can't tell you with any certainty why in Matthew and Mark, Jesus healed them all and does not today. The only thing I can tell you, we have read up to this point in our study in the New Testament that in some places Jesus could not heal because of lack of faith, and the lack of faith was present because they had known Jesus as a child growing up and didn't realize he was divine. So they didn't have faith in him, especially the people of Nazareth, perhaps the people of Capernaum, the people in the area of the Sea of Galilee, where he grew up, did not believe he was the Son of God, so they did not expect anything from him. And that's what faith is. Faith is receiving what you ask for because you expect it and you receive it. So if we are not perhaps expecting the healing, if we do it only because, well, you really should, if you go to a doctor, you really should be prayed for too. If that is our attitude, perhaps that's it. But I'm not prepared to look at a person and tell them with certainty, you're not healed for this reason or the other. Can't do that. But let me go on and read. He healed them all. Great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. And he charged them they should not make him known. Don't tell people where I am and who I am. That it might be fulfilled what the prophet Isaiah said. What did Isaiah say about him? Isaiah said, behold my servant that I've chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he shall show judgment to the Gentiles. Isaiah was a prophet. Isaiah was given these words by God the Father and spoke them. He shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed. You know what a reed is? Thing like soul growing out of the ground. Bruised. Jesus was referred to as one who would be bruised for our iniquities. He would be beaten. He would be hurt. They're definitely talking about Jesus. A bruised reed shall not break. You can bruise it. You can injure it. You cannot break it or make it ineffective. And smoking flax. I don't know how to explain to you what flax is if you haven't seen it growing. And I don't know, y'all are, I guess we got a couple of country folks and a couple of city folks here with us tonight. You won't quench. You won't, if it's smoking, you're not going to put the fire out. You can't quench it. Till he send forth judgment unto victory. And in his name shall the Gentiles trust. We're getting ideas here that Jesus, well, we know he came to the Jews first, also came to the Gentiles. Until this time, the Jews are not to have much to do with the Gentiles because that means you're going to go with them people, you're going to be like them. And God wanted his people to be separate and to live differently than the folks over here. But in order to bring them the gospel, Yes, Jesus is now going to bring the gospel, not only to the Jews, but to the Gentiles. Now we go to Mark 3, and we get basically the same information. But Jesus withdrew himself with his disciples to the sea. That would be toward the Mediterranean. They're not speaking, I don't believe, of the Dead Sea, although that is much closer than the Mediterranean to where they've been. A great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea. Judea is south from there, so if they went south, it's logical they also went west. And from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and from beyond Jordan takes us into what at that time was Edom, and so forth, Seir, but is now what is known as the country of Jordan. The Jordan River is the dividing line between what is Israel and what is not. In fact, the dividing line comes right through the Dead Sea. You can get in the Dead Sea, and it's not all that big. It's a lake, it's not a sea. It's called a sea because it's salt water. And it's below sea level. But you can get in the water in Israel, and you can swim and go out the other side, and you're in Jordan. Okay? And from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and from beyond Jordan, and about Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude, when they had heard the great things he did, came unto him. I mean, look, you got a fatal disease. You hear that somebody is healing the sick, and then you hear they're coming out near where you live. You will get yourself out there. And when they heard great things he did, they came unto him, of course. And he spake to his disciples that a small ship should wait on him because of the multitude, lest they should throng him. What he did was get in a little boat, and then the boat was cast off a little bit, and the people were here, and he's nearby in a boat, but he's in the water. And I learned when I was in Greece that they would make buildings and walls and things in such a way to get the wind as it comes over the water and make the wind go where they wanted to, and they sort of force the wind to become a public speaking system, to carry the voice of speakers and people who did plays in those early Grecian days, to carry the voice farther than what it naturally would go by putting things up that would cause the wind to flow in certain directions. So he spoke to his disciples, and a small ship waited on him because of the multitude. For he had healed many, insomuch as they pressed upon him to touch him. You know that song, "He touched me, oh, he touched me." And that's all it took, was one touch. And so everybody wanted to touch him. So he found it necessary to get away from people just a little bit. And that's how he did it. Many as had plagues. A plague is when a lot of people get the same disease. There were plagues of people who had this skin eating disease of leprosy. And there have been other plagues. I remember when I was in Bible college, there were so many people in iron lungs. And we went to minister in Chicago, in Cook County, where Chicago is. There were huge wards, not 2 beds, not 4 beds, but 100 beds. But they had too many patients, and some of those rooms had 125 beds in them. It was, I don't know how they ministered to these people. It was hard for us to go and talk with them and sing to them and preach to them. In iron lungs, that's a plague when a whole lot of people have the same thing. And he spoke to his, let's see, and unclean, they tried to touch him, as many as had plagues. In other words, what they had was hopeless. They was get healed from Jesus or die. Of course they're going to touch him. And unclean spirits, we've read before that some of the people were healed of diseases, that's dis-ease or sickness. But some were healed because they had a demon spirit. But you would look at the person, you would hear their story, you would examine them, and they appeared to be equally sick for the equal reasons. But just keep in your mind that some of the people that Jesus healed, their sickness was caused by something physical, a dis-ease, a physical problem. And some of the people that Jesus healed were sick because there was a demon. A demon is a fallen angel, one of the 1/3 of the angels that got kicked out of heaven when Lucifer had his rebellion. Let me back up. For he had healed many, insomuch as they pressed upon him to touch him, as many as had plagues. And unclean spirits, when they saw him, fell down before him, saying, Thou art the Son of God. Now, I don't know how likely it is that you've seen many evil spirits. I don't know where you've been, what your experiences are. We don't have a lot of this. And the tendency is to say, we don't have it anymore. Nevertheless, spirit-filled ministers still pray these prayers and get answers. And there are certain Catholic priests that are authorized to perform exorcisms, which is the casting out of an evil spirit. But when you're dealing with an evil spirit, you could look at a person from a distance and one looks the same as another. And we've already read that some of what these that we call diseases were diseases. It could be a failure of some body organ. It could be some disease, some injury that they couldn't get over. But you could look at somebody that looked and appeared just like them and appeared to have the same problem, but that person's problem was because they had an evil spirit in them. Those that are from evil spirits, and this is a whole other subject, and I'm not going to try to explain it tonight, but talking about evil spirits, they can be cast out. I see, I'm just reading something here. I would have to know who you were. If you want to send me a PM, I don't know who you are. I have not stopped sending things, but it is possible that you're not getting something. And remind me later when I get through teaching, and I'll tell you why some are not getting um, stuff that used to get stuff. But I need to know who you were to know. I sent things out earlier today. But let's get back to this for right now. I guess I didn't, but I haven't stopped sending anything, no. Um, if I knew who you were, I probably would remember why you're not getting anything because I have to click on each one. Okay, so are um, uh, some are sick and others seem to have the exact same thing. The difference is with some, it's a disease, a physical failure of some kind. With others, it's a demon spirit. Now, I say that because here, um, it says in verse 11, and unclean spirits, when they saw him, this is a fallen angel. 1/3 of the angels were kicked out of heaven. And we refer to them as demons. But to know who they are and what powers they have, they are fallen angels. Angels don't die. Angels aren't conceived. Angels aren't born. Every angel that was created is still alive. Those that are fallen are down here on earth and they appear as demons. These demons know exactly who Jesus is. If you saw your firstborn son for the first time in 10 years, you'd certainly know who he was. You saw your first wife after 5 years, you'd know who it was. You don't suddenly not know who it is. And these unclean spirits, when they saw what Jesus was doing, remember they lived at one time in heaven. Jesus created, along with his Father, the angels before human beings were created. They know things. As I said, there are no little baby angels and there are no teenage angels. I know people like to think that when you die, you become an angel. The dogs, when they die, do not become rose bushes. It's a different species altogether. People, when they die, it's nice to think about little babies are going to be flying over us, protecting us. Those are nice thoughts, but that's all they are. They're ideas. They're not real things. So these unclean spirits are fallen angels. They saw him. They fell down. Boy, I imagine they wish they had fallen down when Lucifer was talking them into being a rebellion in heaven. They fell down and cried, saying, "Thou art the Son of God." In other scriptures, we have similar things, and people are saying, "Thou art the Son of God, for no man doeth the things that thou doest except God be with him." But here they're simply saying, "You are the Son of God." And straightway he charged them that they should not make him known, again, as he's done before. Now we go to another subject, and we're only going to be on this subject maybe about 6 or 8 verses, and then we're going to end probably until after Christmas. After Christmas, is New Year's. We now come to Jesus and his 12 apostles. My Bible says, you go every few verses and they give you a title. This title is Jesus Selects 12 Apostles. Well, we refer to them as the disciples. What's the difference? We probably will not get into that now, but when we come back to it in a couple of weeks, we will. We were in Mark 3, verse 12, and now we go on to verse 13. We're in the same chapter, but the subject has changed. He goeth up into a mountain, and he calleth unto him whom he would. He decided who he wants. And he calls those to him. And they came unto him. And he ordained 12 that they should be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach. To preach is to teach under an anointing, and to have the power to heal sicknesses. He called his disciples or apostles so that they would preach, and they would have the power to heal sicknesses. Now, half of the sicknesses, I don't know that the number is half, but some of the sicknesses are from body dysfunctions, and the other half are possessed of evil spirits. So he calls them to preach. In verse 15, he gives them the power to heal sicknesses and to cast out devils, because those are the two places that so far in our reading of the Gospels, this third time through the Bible, he calls them to preach and to heal sicknesses. And getting rid of sicknesses is doing two things. If the sickness is a body dysfunction, it's healing they need. If the sickness is there because there's a demon spirit, then the spirit is cast out. So he calls them to preach. He gives them power to heal sicknesses and to cast out devils. And Simon, he surnamed Peter. Quit calling him Simon anymore. Now he calls him Peter. Occasionally Simon Peter. And James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James. And he gives them a surname. And they're called the sons of thunder. And Andrew and Philip are two other brothers. And then there's Bartholomew and Matthew. Matthew, remember, was the tax collector. And Thomas and James. There's another James now. This James is the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus. And then there's Simon the Canaanite. So there's another Simon. And Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed him. And they went into a house. Let me read 4 more verses. We are now in Luke 6. It came to pass in those days that he went to the mountain and prayed, and he continued all night in prayer. And when it was day, he called his disciples, and of them he chose 12. A disciple is a student. If you follow a certain evangelist, where every time they're giving a revival somewhere near where you could go, and you go there, you're a follower of them. If you're learning from them, if you're following them in order to learn from them, then you're a disciple. Of those that followed him, that were disciples, he chose 12, and he named them apostles. Simon, we're talking about Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon the son of Zelotes, Judas, the brother of James, and Judas Iscariot, which was the traitor. Now we're going to come to, I'm going to read another 4 verses and then I'm going to quit. Because after 4 more verses, it's going to take us to, oh, I think I know who's writing. I pick up a lot of clues. And in the last couple of days, I think I know who has written, who number 28 is. Okay. Let me get us to the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, and then that's a good place to start the next time we get through with the holidays and come back to this. This is Luke 6. Came down with them and stood in the plain in the company of the disciples. A great multitude of people came from Judea and Jerusalem. That's in the south. And from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon. That's from the west. They came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And they were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed. And the whole multitude tried to touch him. And he would feel when power, the word here is virtue, went out of him, and he healed them all. Today is 12/18/16. It'll probably be 2 weeks before we come back here. When we come back, we're going to be, blessed art thou, and blessed are those who do this, and blessed are those who do the other. We'll be in the Beatitudes. Let me close the video, and then we'll chat. And until the next video, which is, there will be other videos, but not on this topic for a couple of weeks. Until then, blessings on you.